What if everything you've been told about relationships after 60 was wrong? What if instead of fading into invisibility, you're actually entering the most powerful phase of your romantic life? What if the qualities men truly desire in a woman at this stage have nothing to do with youth and everything to do with the wisdom, authenticity, and depth that only come with living fully? Welcome back to The Heart Code, where we explore the deepest truths about relationships, personal growth, and the beautiful complexity of human connection. I'm so glad you're here with us today, because we're about to dive into a topic that matters deeply to so many of you watching right now. Before we begin, I want to ask you for a small favor. If you find value in what we share today, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps us reach more women who need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe to The Heart Code and ring that notification bell so you never miss our insights on relationships, psychology, and personal empowerment. Your comments mean the world to us, so please share your thoughts and experiences below. And if you'd like to go the extra mile in supporting this channel and the work we do, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support allows us to continue creating content that empowers and enlightens. Now let's talk about something that challenges many of the assumptions our society has fed us for far too long. Today, we're exploring insights inspired by Jorge Bucay, the renowned Argentinian psychotherapist and writer whose work has transformed how millions understand relationships and personal growth. Bucay's wisdom cuts through cultural myths and reveals profound truths about what creates genuine connection between people, especially in the later chapters of life. The 5 things we'll discuss today might surprise you. They might challenge what you believe about yourself and your worth. But more importantly, they might liberate you from limiting beliefs that have been holding you back from the love and connection you deserve. So let's begin this journey together. The cultural lie we've been sold for decades, perhaps centuries. Our culture has perpetuated a damaging narrative. It whispers, sometimes shouts, that a woman's value in the romantic marketplace diminishes with age. It suggests that after 60, women should be grateful for whatever attention they receive, that they should lower their standards, compromise their needs, and accept less than they deserve. This narrative is not just wrong, it's destructive. It's kept countless women locked in unfulfilling relationships or afraid to pursue new ones. It's convinced intelligent, accomplished, beautiful women that their best days are behind them. But here's the truth that Jorge Bucay and other forward-thinking relationship experts understand. Maturity is not a liability in love. It's an asset, a profound asset. The qualities that genuinely attract quality men who are themselves emotionally mature and seeking real partnership, are qualities that deepen and strengthen with age. They are qualities that a 25-year-old simply cannot possess, no matter how physically attractive she might be. Before we dive into these 5 specific qualities, I want you to understand something fundamental. The insights we're sharing today aren't about changing yourself to please men. They're not about molding yourself into someone you're not, or performing femininity in ways that feel inauthentic. These qualities are about recognizing and embracing who you already are. They're about understanding your inherent value and presenting your authentic self with confidence. Because when you do that, you naturally attract people who appreciate the real you. Thing number 1, emotional independence. The first quality that mature men deeply desire in a woman after 60 is emotional independence. And let me be clear about what this means, because emotional independence is often misunderstood. Emotional independence doesn't mean being cold, distant, or unavailable. It doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or pretending you don't need anyone. What it means is having a stable emotional core that isn't constantly seeking validation, reassurance, or completion from external sources. Jorge Bucay speaks extensively about the concept of self-sufficiency in relationships. He argues that healthy love is not about two incomplete halves finding each other to make a whole. It's about two whole people choosing to walk together, enhancing each other's lives without depending on each other for basic emotional stability. By the time you reach 60, you've lived through heartbreak, disappointment, triumph, and transformation. You've learned, or had the opportunity to learn, that your emotional well-being cannot and should not rest entirely in someone else's hands. You've discovered that you can survive difficult emotions, that you can comfort yourself, that you can find joy and meaning in your own company. This emotional maturity is incredibly attractive to men who have done their own inner work. Why? Because it creates the foundation for a truly balanced partnership. Think about the alternative. Think about relationships where one partner is constantly anxious about the other's feelings, desperately seeking reassurance, unable to be alone, emotionally dependent to the point of suffocation. These relationships are exhausting, they're draining. They create a dynamic where one person becomes the emotional caretaker and the other becomes the perpetual child. Mature men who have also done the work of growing into themselves, don't want to be anyone's savior. They don't want to be responsible for someone else's happiness. They want a partner, not a project. They want someone who has cultivated her own inner garden, who brings her own light to the relationship rather than expecting him to illuminate her darkness. When you demonstrate emotional independence, you signal several important things. You signal that you have self-respect. You signal that you've done the work of understanding yourself. You signal that you're capable of being a true partner rather than a dependent. This doesn't mean you never lean on your partner. It doesn't mean you never ask for support or show vulnerability. In fact, emotional independence creates the safety necessary for real vulnerability. When both people in a relationship know they're fundamentally okay on their own, they can afford to be truly open with each other without fear that dependency will crush the connection. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, a woman constantly texts her partner throughout the day, becomes anxious if he doesn't respond immediately, needs frequent reassurance that he still cares, and struggles to enjoy activities without him present. She interprets every mood shift as potentially about her, and she requires constant emotional management. In the second scenario, a woman has her own interests, friendships, and sources of fulfillment. She enjoys her partner's company and values the relationship, but she doesn't need constant contact to feel secure. She can be happy spending an afternoon alone or with friends. She trusts the relationship without needing endless proof. Which scenario sounds more appealing? Which woman would you rather spend time with? Which dynamic creates space for both people to breathe, to be themselves, to genuinely choose each other rather than need each other? Emotional independence also manifests in how you handle conflict. An emotionally independent woman doesn't collapse into despair at the first sign of disagreement. She doesn't interpret different opinions as rejection. She can maintain her center even when the relationship hits turbulence, which every relationship inevitably does. This quality becomes especially important in relationships later in life, because both partners typically have established lives, adult children, friendships, and routines. The ability to maintain your own emotional stability while integrating another person into your life is crucial. You're not looking to merge completely with another person. You're looking to build something alongside them while maintaining your individual identity. Jorge Bucay emphasizes that love should add to your life, not complete it. If you need someone to complete you, what you're seeking isn't love. It's a band-aid for your own incompleteness. And no person, no matter how wonderful, can fill that void. Only you can do that work. So how do you cultivate or demonstrate emotional independence? It starts with building a life that feels fulfilling on its own terms. It means having passions, pursuits, friendships, and goals that exist independently of romantic relationship. It means developing the ability to self-soothe when you're anxious, to find joy in your own company, to validate yourself rather than constantly seeking external validation. It also means being honest with yourself about your patterns. Do you tend to lose yourself in relationships? Do you make your partner's mood your responsibility? Do you sacrifice your own needs and desires to keep the peace? These patterns indicate emotional dependence, and recognizing them is the first step toward transformation. The beautiful paradox is that the more emotionally independent you become, the more capable you are of genuine intimacy. When you're not desperately clutching at connection out of fear of being alone, you're free to connect authentically, to be vulnerable without being needy, to love without losing yourself. Men who have reached 60 and beyond, men who understand themselves and value emotional health, recognize this quality instantly. They're drawn to it like a beacon because it promises the kind of mature, balanced partnership they're seeking. Thing number 2, intellectual curiosity and depth. The second quality that men deeply value in women after 60 is intellectual curiosity and depth. And this goes far beyond formal education or IQ scores. This is about a certain quality of mind, a way of engaging with the world that remains vibrant, questioning, and alive. Jorge Bucay's work is deeply philosophical. He draws on psychology, literature, spirituality, and human observation to explore what it means to live consciously and love authentically. His approach assumes that people want to think deeply, to question their assumptions, to grow in understanding, and this assumption is especially relevant for relationships in later life. By the time you reach 60, if you've been truly living rather than just existing, you've accumulated a wealth of experience. You've seen patterns in human behavior. You've witnessed the consequences of different choices. You've developed perspectives on life, love, relationships, meaning, and purpose. A woman who has reflected on these experiences, who has extracted wisdom from them, who continues to ask questions and seek understanding, brings something invaluable to a relationship. She brings the possibility of meaningful conversation, of intellectual companionship, of mutual growth. Think about what long-term relationships actually consist of. Yes, there's physical intimacy. Yes, there's practical partnership, managing daily life together. But the bulk of a relationship, especially as you age, is conversation. It's the thousands of hours you spend talking, sharing ideas, exploring thoughts, making sense of the world together. If those conversations are shallow, repetitive, or limited to surface-level topics, the relationship becomes boring, tedious, a prison of small talk and predictable exchanges. But if those conversations crackle with insight, curiosity, humor, and genuine exchange, the relationship becomes a source of endless fascination. Intellectual curiosity means you're still interested in learning. You read, whether books, articles, or essays. You think about what you read. You have opinions, but you're also open to having those opinions challenged and evolved. You ask questions. You want to understand things more deeply. This doesn't mean you need to discuss philosophy or quantum physics over breakfast. Intellectual depth can manifest in countless ways. It might be a thoughtful analysis of human nature based on your observations. It might be an insightful perspective on current events. It might be a creative approach to problem solving. It might be the ability to see patterns and connections that others miss. What matters is that there's something happening beneath the surface. There's a mind actively engaged with life rather than passively consuming it. Men who value this quality have typically cultivated it themselves. They've remained curious about life. They've continued to read, learn, question, and grow. And they're looking for a partner who can meet them in that space, who can be a genuine intellectual companion. This becomes especially important because, let's be honest, by 60, physical attraction, while still important, is no longer the primary driver of lasting connection. Yes, chemistry matters. But what sustains a relationship over years is compatibility of mind and spirit. It's whether you actually enjoy talking to this person, whether their thoughts interest you, whether they challenge you to think in new ways. Jorge Bucay talks about the importance of maintaining individual growth within relationships. He cautions against relationships where both people stop evolving, where they settle into fixed patterns and predictable routines without any dynamic element. Intellectual curiosity is what keeps relationships dynamic. When you bring intellectual depth to a relationship, you also bring the capacity for meaningful problem solving. Life presents challenges, especially in later years. Health issues, family complexities, financial concerns, existential questions about meaning and mortality. Navigating these challenges requires more than just emotional support. It requires wisdom, perspective, and the ability to think through difficult situations together. A woman who has cultivated intellectual depth is someone a man can truly rely on, not just for comfort, but for counsel. She's someone whose perspective he values, whose insights help him see situations more clearly, whose wisdom complements his own. This quality also relates to how you tell stories and share experiences. An intellectually curious woman doesn't just report what happened, she reflects on what it means. She draws connections. She finds the humor or the lesson or the deeper significance. Her stories are engaging because they're not just recitations of events, but explorations of meaning. Let me give you another concrete example. Imagine a conversation about aging. One approach might be to simply complain about the difficulties, the losses, the frustrations. Another approach might be to explore what aging teaches us about letting go, about what truly matters, about the evolution of identity over a lifetime. Both conversations are about aging, but one remains on the surface while the other dives deep. Intellectual curiosity also manifests in how you approach differences. When you and your partner disagree, do you simply dig in and defend your position? Or do you get curious about why he sees things differently? Can you explore the assumptions underlying both perspectives? Can you learn something from the disagreement rather than just trying to win? This quality is particularly attractive to men who have spent their lives in professions or pursuits that required thinking, whether business, academia, the arts, or any field that values intellectual engagement. These men have been accustomed to being mentally stimulated, to having their ideas challenged and expanded. They're not going to be satisfied with a partner who can't meet them on that level. But here's something important to understand. Intellectual depth doesn't mean being intellectual in a showy or pretentious way. It doesn't mean dropping names of philosophers or trying to impress with vocabulary. In fact, genuine intellectual depth is often characterized by the ability to communicate complex ideas in simple, accessible ways. What it means is having a rich inner life. It means you think about things, you wonder about things, you make connections, you see beneath the surface, and you can share that inner richness with a partner in ways that deepen the relationship. The cultivation of this quality is a lifelong journey. It requires commitment to ongoing learning, whether formal or informal. It requires reading, not just for entertainment, but for understanding. It requires seeking out diverse perspectives, talking to people with different experiences, traveling when possible, or exploring virtually when it's not. It also requires reflection, taking time to think about your experiences, to journal, to discuss ideas with friends, to integrate what you're learning into a coherent worldview. This reflective practice is what transforms information into wisdom, And wisdom, ultimately, is what men are seeking in women after 60. Not just knowledge, but wisdom. The ability to put knowledge into perspective, to understand context, to make good judgments, to see the big picture while attending to important details. When you embody intellectual curiosity and depth, you signal that you're someone worth knowing deeply. You promise that a relationship with you will never be boring, that there will always be new layers to discover, new conversations to explore, new insights to share. Thing number 3, authentic self-knowledge and acceptance. The third quality that mature men desire in women after 60 is perhaps the most powerful and yet the most challenging to achieve. Authentic self-knowledge combined with genuine self-acceptance. This quality is at the very heart of Jorge Bucay's teachings, where he emphasizes again and again that the journey to mature love must begin with the journey to self-understanding. You cannot love another person authentically if you haven't learned to see and accept yourself authentically. By 60, you've had ample opportunity to get to know yourself. You've seen yourself in multiple contexts, relationships, successes, and failures. You've observed your patterns, your triggers, your strengths, and your shadows. The question is, have you been paying attention? Have you been willing to look honestly at what you've seen? Self-knowledge means understanding your emotional patterns. You know what situations trigger anxiety, anger, or defensiveness in you. You understand why. You've traced these patterns back to their origins, whether in childhood experiences, past relationships, or cultural conditioning. You don't just react, you understand your reactions. It means knowing your values, what actually matters to you versus what you've been told should matter. You've distinguished between your authentic desires and the desires that were programmed into you by family, culture, or society. You know what brings you genuine joy, what drains you, what compromises you're willing to make, and which ones violate your core. It means understanding your relationship patterns. You recognize the type of people you're attracted to and why. You understand the dynamics that have played out in your past relationships, your role in those dynamics, and how you've contributed to both successes and failures. You've stopped blaming others entirely for what went wrong and taken ownership of your part. But self-knowledge alone isn't enough. Many people have extensive self-knowledge, but use it as ammunition for self-criticism. They know themselves, but they hate what they know. This is where self-acceptance comes in, and it's the more difficult piece. Self-acceptance doesn't mean complacency. It doesn't mean you stop growing or believe you're perfect. What it means is that you've made peace with your fundamental humanity. You've accepted that you, like everyone else, are a mixture of light and shadow, strengths and weaknesses, wisdom and foolishness. You've extended compassion to yourself. Jorge Bucay writes beautifully about the concept of embracing your wholeness. He argues that we cannot be truly intimate with others while we're busy hiding parts of ourselves, even from ourselves. The parts we deny, the parts we're ashamed of, the parts we try to suppress. These create barriers to genuine connection. When a woman has achieved authentic self-knowledge and acceptance, it transforms how she shows up in relationships. She's not performing. She's not pretending to be someone she's not to attract or keep a partner. She's not hiding her quirks, her history, her opinions, or her needs. She's simply being herself with a quiet confidence that says, "This is who I am. Take it or leave it." This authenticity is magnetic. Why? Because it's incredibly rare. Most people, even at 60, are still wearing masks. They're still trying to project an image. They're still afraid that if someone sees who they really are, they'll be rejected. This fear creates a kind of tension, a guardedness that prevents real intimacy. But when you've done the work of knowing and accepting yourself, that guardedness dissolves. You become available for real connection because you're not constantly monitoring yourself, editing yourself, or performing yourself. You can be present with another person because you're fully present with yourself. Let me be specific about what this looks like in practice. A woman with authentic self-knowledge and acceptance can speak about her past, including her mistakes and regrets, without shame or defensiveness. She can say, "Yes, I made some poor choices in my 30s. Here's what I learned from them." She's not trying to present herself as having always been wise. She's showing her growth journey. She can talk about her needs and boundaries clearly. She doesn't hint or manipulate or hope someone will read her mind. She says, "I need this in a relationship. I can't be in a relationship without it." And she's not apologetic about it. She knows herself well enough to know what works for her and what doesn't. She can acknowledge her weaknesses without it diminishing her. She might say, "I'm not great with financial details, but I'm really good at understanding people and reading emotional dynamics." She knows that having weaknesses doesn't make her defective. It makes her human. And she's looking for a partner whose strengths complement hers. She's comfortable with her sexuality, whatever form that takes, whether she's highly sexual or less interested in physical intimacy, whether she has particular preferences or boundaries. She's not ashamed of her authentic sexual self. She can communicate about this openly. She knows what she values in terms of lifestyle, and she's not willing to pretend otherwise. If she values quiet evenings at home, she's not going to pretend to be a social butterfly. If she loves adventure and activity, she's not going to downplay that to seem more agreeable. She trusts that the right match will appreciate her authentic preferences. This quality is especially attractive to men because it eliminates games and ambiguity. Mature men have grown tired of trying to decode what someone really wants or means. They appreciate directness. They value knowing where they stand. A woman who knows herself and is comfortable expressing that self makes relationship infinitely easier and more enjoyable. There's also something deeply peaceful about being with someone who has achieved self-acceptance. There's no drama around their identity, no constant need for reassurance about their worth, no fishing for compliments or validation. They're settled in themselves. This settledness creates a calm center in the relationship, a place both people can return to when life gets chaotic. Jorge Bucay emphasizes that self-acceptance is not the same as self-esteem boosting or positive affirmations. It's not about constantly telling yourself how great you are. It's about being okay with exactly who you are, including the parts that aren't great. It's about integration rather than inflation. The journey to authentic self-knowledge and acceptance often requires difficult work. It might mean therapy or counseling to understand patterns and heal old wounds. It might mean honest conversations with people from your past to understand how they experienced you. It might mean journaling, meditation, or other practices that create space for self-reflection. It definitely requires courage. Looking honestly at yourself, at your mistakes, your selfishness, your fears, your weaknesses, takes courage. It's much easier to stay in denial, to blame others, to maintain an idealized self-image. But that path leads to shallow connections and repeated relationship failures. The reward for this courage is freedom. When you know and accept yourself, you're no longer a prisoner to others' opinions. You don't need someone to validate you because you've validated yourself. You don't need someone to complete you because you're already whole. You simply want to share your life with someone, which is a completely different energy than needing someone. Men recognize this quality intuitively. When they meet a woman who possesses it, they feel they can relax. They don't have to walk on eggshells or manage someone's fragile ego. They don't have to constantly reassure or prop up. They can be honest, knowing that honesty will be received by a person who is fundamentally secure in herself. This quality also prevents a great deal of relationship conflict. When you know yourself, you're less likely to project your issues onto your partner. You're less likely to blame them for your unhappiness. You're less likely to expect them to fix things that only you can fix within yourself. And perhaps most importantly, when you accept yourself, you're much better able to accept others. You understand that everyone is complex, contradictory, imperfect. You don't demand perfection from a partner because you've stopped demanding it from yourself. This creates space for a real relationship between real people, not an idealized fantasy that can never be sustained. Thing number 4, joyfulness and capacity for pleasure. The fourth quality that men are drawn to in women after 60 might surprise you: joyfulness and the capacity for pleasure. In a culture that often associates aging with decline, loss, and resignation, a woman who maintains access to joy and pleasure is like a bright light in the darkness. Jorge Bucay speaks often about the importance of embracing life fully, of saying yes to experience, of cultivating pleasure and joy as acts of resistance against despair. He understands that life includes suffering, that loss and pain are inevitable, but he also insists that joy is equally part of the human experience and that we have a responsibility to pursue it. By 60, you've likely experienced significant loss. Perhaps you've lost parents, friends, or even a spouse. You've witnessed decline in yourself and others. You've seen dreams fail to materialize. You've encountered disappointment in its many forms. The question is, has this made you bitter, or has it made you more determined to find and create joy wherever you can? A woman who has maintained her capacity for joy despite life's difficulties demonstrates remarkable resilience. She shows that she hasn't given up on life, that she still believes pleasure and happiness are worthwhile pursuits, that she's not just waiting for the end but actively engaged in living. This quality manifests in multiple ways. It might be a genuine, unguarded laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in the belly, that's infectious, that makes everyone around smile. It might be the way her eyes light up when she talks about something she loves, whether it's her garden, her grandchildren, a book she's reading, or a place she wants to visit. It might be her willingness to try new things, to say yes to experiences, to be spontaneous occasionally. It might be the way she savors a good meal, really tasting it, appreciating it, rather than eating mechanically. It might be the pleasure she takes in her body, in movement, in dance, in physical sensation, refusing to treat her body as something shameful or defunct. Joyfulness is not the same as constant cheerfulness or toxic positivity. A joyful woman isn't someone who pretends everything is fine or who denies pain and difficulty. Rather, she's someone who has learned to find pockets of joy, even in difficult circumstances, who believes that pleasure is worth pursuing, who hasn't allowed life's hardships to completely shut down her access to positive emotion. This quality is incredibly attractive to men because it promises that a relationship with you will enhance life rather than simply being another obligation or source of stress. Men, like women, want partners who make life more enjoyable, who bring lightness and fun, who can laugh at absurdity, who find beauty in ordinary moments. Think about the alternative. Think about a person who has become rigid, bitter, joyless, someone who complains constantly, who finds fault with everything, who has forgotten how to play, how to be silly, how to appreciate small pleasures. Someone who treats everything as serious and heavy. This energy is draining. Being around it requires constant effort to maintain your own mood. But a joyful person, someone who finds reasons to smile, who appreciates beauty, who can be playful, who seeks out pleasure, this person lifts the energy of everyone around them. Their joy is contagious. They remind others that life, despite its difficulties, is still worth celebrating. The capacity for pleasure is related but slightly different. It's about remaining sensually alive, still connected to your body and its capacity for experiencing pleasure in its many forms. This includes but isn't limited to sexual pleasure. It's about appreciating the warmth of sun on your skin, the taste of good food, the smell of flowers, the feeling of soft fabric, the sound of music that moves you. Many people, as they age, become disconnected from their bodies. They start to see their bodies purely as sources of pain or disappointment, as things that are failing them. This disconnection closes off an entire dimension of life. But a woman who has maintained her connection to her body's capacity for pleasure, who still takes joy in physical sensation, who treats her body with care and appreciation, radiates a kind of vitality that's deeply appealing. This doesn't mean you need to have a perfect body or be conventionally beautiful. It means inhabiting your body with presence and appreciation. It means moving in ways that feel good, wearing clothes that please you, engaging your senses, staying alive to physical experience. In the context of romantic relationships, this quality suggests that you're still interested in intimacy, in touch, in the physical dimension of connection. While sexuality certainly changes with age, the capacity for pleasure and intimacy can remain vibrant if it's been tended to. A woman who demonstrates that she's still interested in pleasure, still sensual, still open to physical connection, signals that she's fully alive. Jorge Bucay emphasizes the importance of maintaining passion for life. He warns against the danger of going through the motions, of existing rather than living, of letting fear or disappointment shut you down. Joyfulness and the capacity for pleasure are expressions of passion for life. They show that you're still engaged, still curious, still wanting to experience what life has to offer. This quality also relates to gratitude. Joyful people tend to be people who have cultivated the practice of noticing and appreciating what's good in their lives rather than fixating solely on what's wrong or lacking. They've trained themselves to see beauty, to find humor, to appreciate small gifts. This grateful orientation makes them pleasant to be around and creates an atmosphere of abundance rather than scarcity. Men who are themselves still connected to joy and pleasure recognize this quality as essential. They're not interested in relationships that feel like obligations or duties. They want partnerships that are life-enhancing, that bring more color and vibrancy to existence. They want someone they can enjoy things with, whether that's traveling, dining, attending cultural events, or simply sitting together watching a sunset. The cultivation of this quality requires intention, especially if life has been hard on you. It means making time for things that bring you joy, even small things. It means saying yes to invitations sometimes, instead of always retreating into isolation. It means experimenting with new forms of pleasure, whether that's a dance class, a cooking course, a hiking group, or a book club. It also means working through grief and disappointment, rather than staying stuck in it. While it's important to honor your pain and losses, it's equally important not to let them define your entire existence. Healing work, whether through therapy, spiritual practice, or other means, can help you process difficult emotions so they don't block your access to joy. Physical self-care is also crucial. When your body feels good, when you're moving regularly, eating well, sleeping enough, you naturally have more capacity for pleasure and joy. Depression and joylessness often have physical components that can be addressed through lifestyle changes. The beautiful thing about joyfulness is that it creates a positive feedback loop. When you cultivate joy, you attract more positive experiences and people. Your joyful energy draws others who are similarly oriented. This creates more opportunities for connection, pleasure, and happiness, which reinforces your joyful orientation. A man who encounters a woman with genuine joyfulness feels immediate relief. He feels that with this person, life could be lighter, more fun, more worth living. He senses that she hasn't given up, that she's still in the game, that she'll bring energy and enthusiasm to whatever they do together. This is enormously appealing, especially to men who have themselves maintained their own connection to joy. and are looking for someone to share it with. Thing number 5, generosity of spirit. The fifth and final quality that men deeply value in women after 60 is generosity of spirit. This is perhaps the quality that ties all the others together, the one that makes a woman truly exceptional and irreplaceable. Generosity of spirit is not about being a doormat. It's not about self-sacrifice or martyrdom. It's not about giving until you're empty or putting everyone else's needs before your own. In fact, true generosity of spirit is only possible when you're already full, when you're giving from overflow rather than from depletion. Jorge Bucay makes a crucial distinction between healthy giving and codependent giving. Healthy giving comes from a place of abundance. You give because you want to, because it brings you joy, because you have enough to share. Codependent giving comes from a place of fear or need. You give to earn love, to avoid abandonment, to feel valuable, or to control outcomes. A woman with generosity of spirit has done the work we've discussed in the previous 4 qualities. She's emotionally independent, so she can give without strings attached. She has intellectual depth, so she can be generous with her wisdom and insights. She knows and accepts herself, so she can be generous with her authenticity. She has capacity for joy, so she can be generous with her positive energy. Generosity of spirit manifests in countless ways. It's in how you listen when someone speaks, giving them your full attention rather than waiting for your turn to talk. It's in your willingness to see the best in people, to give them the benefit of the doubt, to believe in their potential even when they're struggling. It's in your capacity for forgiveness, not as a way of condoning harmful behavior, but as a way of refusing to let resentment poison your own heart. It's in your ability to celebrate others' successes without envy, to support their dreams even when they're different from your own, to encourage their growth even when it might be inconvenient for you. Generosity of spirit means you don't keep score. You don't calculate exactly what you've given versus what you've received. You don't hold grudges. You don't punish people for past mistakes. You meet each moment fresh, offering what you can offer, accepting what's offered to you, trusting that over time things will balance out naturally. It means you're quick to express appreciation. You notice when someone does something kind or thoughtful. You acknowledge efforts, even imperfect ones. You're generous with compliments, with recognition, with gratitude. You understand that everyone is fighting their own battles and could use some encouragement. In romantic relationships, generosity of spirit creates an atmosphere of safety and abundance. Your partner knows that you're on their team, that you want good things for them, that you're not there to diminish or compete, but to support and celebrate. This knowledge allows them to relax, to be vulnerable, to show up fully without fear of judgment or punishment. Generosity of spirit also means being generous with your interpretations. When your partner does something that could be interpreted multiple ways, you choose the most generous interpretation when possible. You don't assume the worst. You don't immediately jump to negative conclusions. You give them space to be human, to make mistakes, to have bad days without it meaning something terrible about them or the relationship. This doesn't mean being naive or tolerating genuinely harmful behavior. Generosity of spirit includes healthy boundaries. You can be generous while also being clear about what's acceptable and what's not. But within the bounds of acceptable behavior, you're offering grace, understanding, and compassion. Jorge Bucay writes about the concept of loving generously versus loving possessively. Possessive love tries to control, to limit, to make the beloved smaller so they fit into our needs. Generous love wants the beloved to flourish, and even if that flourishing leads them in unexpected directions, it trusts that real love doesn't diminish with freedom, but grows with it. A woman with generosity of spirit doesn't try to change her partner into someone else. She accepts who they are, even parts that aren't perfect or convenient. She supports their interests, even ones she doesn't share. She wants them to maintain their friendships, pursue their passions, have their own life alongside the shared life. This quality also manifests in how you handle conflict. A generous spirit doesn't try to win arguments or prove the other person wrong. You're genuinely interested in understanding your partner's perspective. You're willing to admit when you're wrong. You're quick to apologize when you've caused hurt, even unintentionally. You extend the same understanding you'd want to receive. Generosity of spirit includes being generous with affection and appreciation. You don't withhold love as punishment. You don't make your partner earn basic kindness and respect. You freely express your care through words, actions, and presence. You make sure they know they matter to you. It also means being generous with your stories and your wisdom. You share your experiences not to lecture, but to illuminate. You offer insights when they're wanted. You're generous with your emotional labor, willing to talk through difficult topics, to support your partner through challenges, to be present for hard conversations. At 60 and beyond, generosity of spirit becomes especially important because both partners have lived long enough to accumulate baggage, wounds, and defensive patterns. The relationship will work only if both people are willing to be generous, to offer each other grace, to work through difficulties with patience and understanding. Men who have developed their own generosity of spirit recognize and value it in women. They understand that this quality makes the difference between a relationship that's a constant struggle and one that's a sanctuary. They know that with a generous, spirited partner, they can weather any storm, navigate any challenge, because there's an underlying commitment to each other's well-being that transcends momentary difficulties. The cultivation of generosity of spirit begins with self-generosity. You must first extend to yourself the kindness, compassion, and understanding you want to offer others. When you're harsh with yourself, constantly self-critical, unforgiving of your own mistakes, you have nothing left to give others. Your cup is empty. But when you practice self-compassion, when you treat yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend, when you forgive yourself for being imperfectly human, you create internal abundance. From this abundance, generosity toward others flows naturally. Generosity of spirit also requires letting go of cynicism. Life may have given you reasons to be cynical, to be guarded, to protect your heart by assuming the worst of people. But cynicism is exhausting and it closes you off from connection. Generosity of spirit asks you to remain open, to continue believing in goodness, to give people chances to show up positively. This doesn't mean being foolish or ignoring red flags. It means approaching new people and situations with openness rather than suspicion, with hope rather than resignation. It means being willing to be disappointed sometimes because the alternative, closing yourself off completely, is worse than occasional disappointment. In practical terms, cultivating generosity of spirit might mean volunteering, helping others, practicing acts of kindness. These actions train your heart to give, to think of others, to contribute to well-being beyond your own. They create a habit of generosity that extends into all your relationships. It might mean practicing gratitude regularly, training yourself to notice what you have rather than what you lack, what's going right rather than what's going wrong. Gratitude creates the sense of abundance that makes generosity possible. It definitely means working on resentments. If you're carrying old grudges, old hurts, old anger, these poison your spirit and make generosity impossible. Healing work, forgiveness practices, therapy if needed, these all help clear out the bitterness that blocks generosity. When a man encounters a woman with genuine generosity of spirit, he feels like he's found something rare and precious. He feels that with this woman, he can be himself. He can make mistakes without being condemned. He can grow without being constrained. He can receive love without it being weaponized. This feeling is what creates deep, lasting bonds. Generosity of spirit is ultimately about creating abundance in relationships, rather than scarcity. It's about approaching love from the assumption that there's enough love, enough kindness, enough support, enough of everything important. This abundance mindset makes relationships places of nourishment rather than competition, of growth rather than limitation, bringing it all together. So let's review these 5 qualities that mature men deeply desire in women after 60, qualities that Jorge Bucay's wisdom illuminates for us. First, emotional independence, the ability to maintain your own center, to be stable in yourself, to partner with someone rather than depend on them for your basic emotional well-being. Second, intellectual curiosity and depth, the quality of mind that remains engaged, questioning, learning, growing, that can offer meaningful companionship and conversation that brings wisdom to the relationship. Third, authentic self-knowledge and acceptance, the courage to see yourself clearly, the compassion to accept what you see, the freedom to show up authentically without masks or pretense. Fourth, joyfulness and capacity for pleasure, the vitality that comes from remaining connected to life's pleasures, from finding reasons to celebrate, from staying sensually alive and engaged with experience. Fifth, generosity of spirit, the ability to give from abundance, to extend grace and understanding, to support another's flourishing, to create an atmosphere of emotional safety and nourishment. Now, here's what's beautiful about these 5 qualities. They're not about becoming someone you're not. They're not about performing or pretending. They're about developing aspects of yourself that make your own life richer, more fulfilling, more meaningful, regardless of whether you're in a relationship or not. These qualities make you, more fully yourself, more alive. They're intrinsically valuable, not just because they're attractive to men, but because they make your life better. And that's the paradox Jorge Bucay points out again and again. When you stop trying to attract someone and start working on becoming the most authentic, developed version of yourself, you naturally become more attractive, not through manipulation or strategy, but through genuine development. The women who embody these qualities aren't thinking about what men want. They're living rich, full, engaged lives. They're working on themselves because growth matters to them. They're pursuing joy because life is short. They're being generous because it aligns with their values. And in living this way, they become magnetic to people who share their orientation toward life. Here's another crucial point. These 5 qualities don't exist in isolation. They reinforce each other. Emotional independence makes authentic self-knowledge possible because you're not dependent on others' approval. Intellectual curiosity deepens self-knowledge by giving you frameworks for understanding yourself. Joyfulness becomes more accessible as you accept yourself. Generosity of spirit flows naturally from inner abundance created by the other qualities. So the work isn't about developing 5 separate qualities, it's about engaging in a process of becoming more whole, more integrated, more fully yourself. As you do this work, all 5 qualities develop naturally. Now, let's address something important. Some of you might be thinking, but shouldn't a man accept me as I am? Why should I have to develop these qualities? And you're right. A good partner will accept you as you are. But there's a difference between acceptance and attraction, between someone tolerating you and someone being genuinely drawn to you. These qualities aren't about changing yourself to please men. They're about becoming the kind of person you yourself would want to be with. Would you want to be in a relationship with someone who's emotionally dependent, intellectually shallow, inauthentic, joyless, and stingy? Probably not. These qualities make you a better partner, but more importantly, they make you a better person living a better life. Also remember that attraction and compatibility go both ways. While you're developing these qualities, you're also becoming more discerning about who you want in your life. A woman who has emotional independence won't tolerate a partner who's emotionally manipulative. A woman with intellectual depth won't be satisfied with someone who never thinks deeply about anything. A woman who knows and accepts herself won't accept someone who's constantly critical or trying to change her. So developing these qualities doesn't make you more willing to accept just any relationship. It makes you more selective, more clear about what you need, more able to recognize a truly compatible partner when you meet them. This brings us to another of Jorge Bucay's core teachings. The right relationship enhances who you already are rather than asking you to diminish yourself. If you meet someone who wants you to be less independent, less thoughtful, less authentic, less joyful, or less generous, they're not the right person. No matter how attractive they might seem in other ways. The qualities we've discussed today are valuable precisely because they allow you to be fully yourself in a relationship. They create the foundation for genuine partnership between two whole people who are choosing to share their lives because it enhances both of them, not because either one needs the other to feel complete. The deeper truth about age and attraction. Let's talk about something that's rarely discussed honestly, the relationship between age and attraction in our culture. We're bombarded with messages that youth equals beauty, that aging makes women invisible, that after a certain age, women should be grateful for any attention they receive. These messages are not just wrong. They're designed to keep you small, insecure, and willing to accept less than you deserve. They're products of a culture that profits from women's insecurity and that values women primarily for how they look rather than who they are. But here's what Jorge Bucay and other wise teachers understand. Real attraction, the kind that sustains relationships over time, has very little to do with physical youth. Yes, initial physical attraction matters, but it's not what keeps people together. It's not what makes a relationship fulfilling, and it's not what mature men are primarily seeking. Men who have done their own work, who have grown emotionally and psychologically, who understand themselves and what creates genuine happiness. These men are looking for the qualities we've discussed today. They're looking for substance. They're looking for compatibility of values and lifestyle. They're looking for someone who enhances their life rather than complicates it. These men have learned, often through painful experience, that physical beauty without emotional maturity, intellectual depth, authenticity, joyfulness, and generosity creates empty, frustrating relationships. They've learned that the most beautiful woman in the room isn't necessarily the best partner. They've learned that character matters more than appearance in determining long-term relationship satisfaction. And here's something else these men understand. Women in their 60s and beyond possess qualities that younger women simply cannot have. The emotional stability that comes from having navigated life's storms. The wisdom that comes from decades of experience. The authenticity that comes from having nothing left to prove. The depth that comes from having truly lived. These qualities are inherently attractive to emotionally mature men. So when we talk about what men want from women after 60, we're really talking about what quality men want. Men who are themselves emotionally mature and looking for genuine partnership. And these men are out there. They're not the majority, perhaps, but they exist, and they're worth waiting for. The tragedy is that many women, believing the cultural lie about age and invisibility, settle for relationships that don't honor their value. They accept partners who don't appreciate their depth, who don't celebrate their wisdom, who don't recognize the gift of their maturity. They accept crumbs when they deserve the whole feast. If this resonates with you, if you've been settling, if you've been believing you should be grateful for whatever attention comes your way, please hear this. You are valuable. You are desirable. You have qualities that are rare and precious. You deserve a partner who recognizes and celebrates that. Developing the 5 qualities we've discussed isn't about making yourself acceptable to men. It's about recognizing and cultivating your own value so that you refuse to accept relationships that don't honor it. The choice before you. So here you are, at 60 or beyond, with a choice before you. You can believe the cultural narratives about aging and invisibility. You can resign yourself to loneliness or settle for unfulfilling relationships. You can let bitterness, fear, or resignation close you off from possibility, or you can choose a different path. You can choose to develop these 5 qualities not for men, but for yourself. You can choose to become emotionally independent, intellectually engaged, authentically yourself, joyfully alive, and generously spirited. You can choose to grow, to evolve, to become more fully who you're meant to be. If you make this second choice, something remarkable happens. You stop waiting for someone to complete you, or rescue you, or validate you. You stop looking for a relationship to fix your life. You start building a life so rich, so full, so satisfying that a relationship becomes an enhancement rather than a necessity. And paradoxically, this is when you become most attractive to the kind of partner you actually want. Not someone who's looking for a caretaker or a trophy or someone to fill their emptiness, but someone who has done their own work, who is whole in themselves, who is looking for a genuine partner to share life's journey. Jorge Bucay teaches that the best relationships are between 2 people who don't need each other but choose each other. 2 people who are complete in themselves but recognize that their lives are enriched by partnership. 2 people who give from abundance rather than need. This is the kind of relationship possible when you embody the 5 qualities we've discussed today. And this is the kind of relationship worth having, the only kind that will truly satisfy you at this stage of life. So the question isn't really about what men want from you. The question is, what do you want for yourself? Who do you want to become? What kind of life do you want to build? What kind of relationship would truly nourish your soul? Answer these questions honestly. Work toward becoming the person you want to be, and trust that the right relationships will follow, not because you've made yourself acceptable to men, but because you've become fully yourself. And that self is inherently attractive to people who are capable of recognizing value when they see it. The journey continues. The beautiful thing about personal development is that it's never too late to begin. At 60, 70, 80, you still have the capacity to grow, to change, to become more of who you're meant to be. Your brain remains plastic. Your heart remains capable of opening. Your spirit remains capable of expansion. If you recognize that you haven't fully developed these 5 qualities, if you see areas where you have work to do, don't let that discourage you. Let it excite you. Let it motivate you. You have the opportunity to spend the coming years becoming more emotionally independent, more intellectually engaged, more authentically yourself, more joyful, more generous. This work is its own reward. Even if you never meet another partner, even if you spend the rest of your life single, developing these qualities will make your life richer, more meaningful, more satisfying. You'll enjoy your own company more. You'll have deeper friendships. You'll experience more joy. You'll feel more at peace. And if you do meet someone, if a relationship develops, it will be a relationship between 2 whole people, 2 people who are bringing their best selves to the partnership. It will be a relationship built on mutual respect, genuine attraction, and shared values rather than need, convenience, or desperation. But Jorge Bucay reminds us that love is not about finding the right person, but about being the right person. When you focus on becoming the person you want to be, when you develop your capacity for independence, depth, authenticity, joy, and generosity, you automatically become the right person for someone who shares your orientation toward life. So take these teachings forward into your life. Reflect on where you are with each of these 5 qualities. Notice where you're strong and where you have room to grow. Make a commitment to your own development, not as a strategy to attract a partner, but as a commitment to living fully, to becoming more yourself, to honoring the precious gift of life you've been given. Remember, you're not trying to become perfect. You're trying to become real. You're trying to strip away the layers of conditioning, protection, and fear that have kept you from being fully alive. You're trying to reclaim parts of yourself that may have been buried or forgotten. You're trying to grow into the fullest expression of who you are. This is sacred work. This is the work of a lifetime. And at 60 and beyond, you have the wisdom, experience, and perspective to do this work in ways that weren't possible when you were younger. You have less to prove and more to give. You have less fear of others' opinions and more trust in your own knowing. You have less time to waste and more appreciation for what's truly valuable. Use these advantages. Use them to become the woman you've always had the potential to be. Use them to create a life that satisfies your soul. Use them to build relationships that honor your worth. Use them to contribute your wisdom and your gifts to the world. And know that in doing so, you're not just serving yourself. You're modeling for younger women what's possible. You're challenging cultural narratives about aging. You're proving that women don't have an expiration date, that we remain valuable, desirable, and powerful throughout our lives. You're paving the way for a new understanding of what it means to be a woman in the later chapters of life. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today, exploring these 5 powerful qualities that men desire in women after 60. I hope Jorge Bucay's wisdom, filtered through our discussion, has given you new perspectives on your own value, your own potential, and your own journey. Remember, these qualities, emotional independence, intellectual curiosity and depth, the authentic self-knowledge and acceptance, joyfulness and capacity for pleasure, and generosity of spirit, aren't just about attracting men. They're about becoming the fullest expression of yourself, about living richly and fully, about honoring the gift of life you've been given. As you move forward from this video, I encourage you to reflect on these qualities. Where are you strong? Where could you grow? What steps might you take to develop areas that need attention? This isn't about self-criticism. It's about honest self-assessment in service of your own growth and fulfillment. And please, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about your experiences. Share your wisdom with other women who are on similar journeys. This community we're building at The Heart Code is so valuable, and your voice matters. Your stories matter. Your insights matter. If you found value in this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps us reach more women who need to hear these messages. Share this video with friends who might benefit from it. Post it on your social media. Help us spread the word that women over 60 are powerful, valuable, and desirable. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to The Heart Code and hit that notification bell. We create content regularly that explores relationships, personal growth, psychology, and empowerment. We're here to support you on your journey, to offer insights and perspectives that help you live more fully and love more wisely. If you'd like to support the work we do here, consider leaving a super thanks. Your financial support allows us to keep creating this content, to keep exploring these important topics, to keep building this community of women who are committed to growth, wisdom, and living authentically. Every contribution, no matter the size, makes a real difference and is deeply appreciated. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought from Jorge Bucay. He says that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the relationship with yourself. Everything else flows from that. When you get that relationship right, when you truly know yourself, accept yourself, and commit to your own growth and well-being, everything else begins to fall into place. So start there. Start with yourself. Work on becoming emotionally independent, intellectually engaged, authentically yourself, joyfully alive, and generously spirited. Do this for you because you deserve to live fully, to experience all that life has to offer, to become everything you're capable of being. And trust that as you do this work, as you become more fully yourself, the right relationships, friendships, romantic partnerships, and connections of all kinds will naturally gravitate toward you, not because you've made yourself acceptable, but because you've made yourself magnetic through the power of authenticity, depth, and wholeness. Thank you again for being part of the Heart Code community. Thank you for your willingness to grow, to question, to explore these important topics with open minds and hearts. Thank you for your courage in looking honestly at yourself and committing to your own development. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring the psychology of relationships, the path to personal empowerment, and the wisdom that comes from living consciously and loving authentically. Until then, take care of yourself, honor your worth, and remember that your best chapters may still be ahead of you. This is the Heart Code, reminding you that you are valuable, you are powerful, and you are worthy of love that honors the fullness of who you are.